We love Disney history at Main Street USA Studios. In this video, we count down the original opening day rides at Disneyland that you can still ride today. First on our list is the Santa Fe and Disneyland Railroad, now called just the Disneyland Railroad. This original ride around the park is a favorite among many for its nostalgic appeal, also because it is sort of a tour around the park. The number 1 and number 2 locomotives were actually built by WED Enterprises, although many guests assume they were historic trains that Disney purchased. Fun fact, the first test run along the full track around the park happened only 1 week prior to Disneyland opening day on July 17, 1955. Next on our list over in Adventureland, the Jungle Cruise. This boat ride through the jungle is based somewhere in the 1920s to 1940s. Disney Imagineer Harper Goff is said to have designed the ride vehicles with inspiration from several films, including The African Queen, which had just been released in 1951. The ride is similar today to how it opened, but there are some differences. The lush jungle has filled in even more with plant life. The boats were originally new-looking and now have a purposeful, rugged look to them that a real working boat might have. The water is dyed to match the track system and the animatronics, but it was originally brown. Today the water is a bluish-green color. And believe it or not, the Jungle Cruise skippers were not always so sassy. Originally, it was a serious delivery by those same skippers. Another opening day attraction that guests can still enjoy today is the Mark Twain Riverboat. Walt always had a connection with Mark Twain, both spending some of their childhood near the banks of the Mississippi River in Missouri, and both becoming well-known types of artists as adults. The steamboat itself was built from scratch for Disneyland. In fact, when funding for Disneyland became sparse, Walt spent some of his personal funds to ensure this boat ride was completed in time. Up next, Autopia. Autopia did open on opening day, and it still can be ridden in Tomorrowland. The ride vehicles and track, though, have changed quite a bit over the years. And the original sponsor, Richfield Oil, has changed since opening to Chevron and then to Honda. At one point, there were 3 different Autopias at Disneyland: Midget Autopia, Junior Autopia, and Tomorrowland Autopia, although the Tomorrowland Autopia is the original and the only one operating today. The next ride on our list is King Arthur Carousel in Fantasyland. Actually, the remainder of the rides on our list are in Fantasyland. 7 of the 11 opening day rides that you can still ride are over in Fantasyland. King Arthur Carousel was part of Walt's inspiration for Disneyland. Walt is said to have gone to the carousel at Griffith Park with his daughters and sit on the bench there, wishing there was a cleaner, more pristine place for parents to take their children. Walt actually purchased the carousel we see at Disneyland today. He refurbished it and replaced the various animals with horses that all appeared to be galloping. Having only galloping horses meant every guest could pretend to be a knight of the Round Table. Snow White's Enchanted Wish is another opening day ride, but you might not recognize the original. It was first named Snow White and Her Adventures, then changed to Snow White's Scary Adventures. That's because up until the latest version, this ride was pretty scary. Parents were said to have complained of how frightening it was, with dungeon scenes and skeletons, and believe it or not, Snow White didn't appear at all in her own ride. This was a common theme in the Fantasyland dark rides. The idea was that the guest was supposed to be the protagonist, in this case, Snow White. Today the ride is much less scary, although the Queen is still pretty intense, and Snow White does appear on the ride. Peter Pan's Flight was an opening day attraction at Disneyland as well. The animated classic Peter Pan had just premiered in 1953, so it makes sense that Peter Pan got his own ride 2 years later when the park opened. The ride exists at almost all parks globally, with the exception of Hong Kong Disney. This ride is still popular in Disneyland today and regularly has a long wait time, even after so many decades. Mr. Toad's Wild Ride opened with Disneyland in 1955, although the ride has been overhauled since, and you likely would not recognize the original. The facade was a medieval tent style as opposed to the English-looking stonework facade Toad Hall we see today. The ride itself was still a car ride like today, but the cars were different and the visuals were much more two-dimensional than the three-dimensional sculpts we have today. Interestingly, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride in Disneyland is the only one that exists globally. Disneyland Paris has a Toad Hall restaurant only. Disney World did have a Mr. Toad's Wild Ride from its own opening day in 1971, but it is now closed. Next on our list is the Mad Tea Party. This spinning teacup ride is still open at Disneyland today. It used to be located centrally in Fantasyland, around where King Arthur Carousel is, but it was moved in 1983. Its design was updated a bit, and it now sits near the Alice in Wonderland Dark Ride. In planning for Disneyland, Walt had initially planned a walk-through Alice attraction, and then changed plans to make a Dark Ride Alice attraction. But ultimately, these plans were cut in favor of the less expensive Teacup Ride. Of course, we did get an Alice Dark Ride a few years later, after opening day in 1958. Next up, Storybook Land Canal Boats. Storybook Land Canal Boats was sort of an opening day ride. It did open in 1955 with the park, but was originally called Canal Boats of the World. What's interesting is the ride had very plain landscape originally. It was even called the Mud Bank Ride because the landscaping was so poor. With an ugly landscape and boats that kept malfunctioning, the ride closed 2 months after the park opened. When it reopened in 1956, it was under its current name, Storybook Land Canal Boats, and the landscaping was now incredible looking. Even today, the landscaping around Storybook Land Canal Boats is very unique and intricate. The final opening day attraction that we will mention in this video is Casey Jr.'s Circus Train. This classic Disneyland ride did open on July 17th with Disneyland, but closed the very next day due to requiring more testing. It did reopen a few weeks later though, and as we know, it is still in the park today. That concludes our list of original opening day rides that you can still ride at Disneyland today. We will also give honorable mention to some of the Main Street transportation vehicles that are still operating, but we didn't consider them rides for this list. What is your favorite original Disneyland ride? Let us know in the comments below. And if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe.